Okay, so guys, apologies for the late start, just setting up a bit there. Now, so what I want to do today is I want to talk you through some examples that you're going to type in and have a look, because I want to illustrate some of the main points about JavaScript, and I want to get you started fairly quickly. The first thing we need to know though about JavaScript is it's not Java. So they share a bit of a name, but they have nothing to do with each other really. Java, if you're familiar with it, is a high-level programming language. It's platform independent, and it runs on a standardized virtual machine. And Java is a big grown-up language. You know, you can do lots of things you want to do with Java. JavaScript is really just it's still a programming language, but we call it a scripting language. Usually when something is called a scripting language, it means it's not really a fully featured, you know, programming language. But you can do an awful lot in JavaScript. And for some reason, JavaScript is all the rage now. Everybody wants to learn JavaScript now, which I think is unfortunate, because from an educational point of view, if you want to learn to program, it's not the best place to start. If you had learned your if your programming modules in first year were in JavaScript, there'd probably be even fewer of you now than there are as it is. You know, it's not a very nice language for beginners. It's not very forgiving. You know, it has if you make a mistake, it just kind of tells you feck off. It doesn't give you much information, and it's easy to go wrong. Anyway, so it's nothing to do with Java, and it's a scripting language that's executed in the browser. So the JavaScript comes down with the web page, and then the browser runs it. So it's running in the browser. It's meant to add interactivity to web pages, and it's fairly limited in what it can do. And also for security reasons, it's limited in what it can do. So JavaScript can't access the file system of the machine it's running on, because you wouldn't want a web page that you've loaded to be able to have a poke around in your hard drive. No, you wouldn't want that. It's fairly standard. I mean, it's fairly standard across all main browsers now. In fairness, nowadays, it's very, you know, the browsers are very compliant. In the early days, you know, Microsoft was on a bit of a solo run, and depending on what you were doing, you might have had loads of code. If this is running in Internet Explorer, do this. If it's running in Firefox, do this. Now, we're not going to do any of that. There's a good chance if you get a JavaScript book, you know, there'll be a whole chapter on like workarounds and hacks for, you know, making it work on this and making it work on that. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to assume that the machine that we're working with is a fully compliant standard browser. Of course, the reality is that many people may still be using old browsers that don't behave like they should, but we're not going to go there. So the code then, the JavaScript code, is embedded in a HTML file or linked to it. But basically, page downloads and code downloads as well, and then the code runs in the browser. It's important to realize that it's running in the browser, like you've like sent the code and it's running in the browser. It's not running somewhere on the web. Okay, that's basically a different module, a different technology. So all of this is running in the browser. And as browsers have become more sophisticated, they can do more and more of the work. There was a time when web pages were very dumb. And you know, they just downloaded the HTML and all of the brains had to be on the server. But more and more of the brains are moving to the browser. And JavaScript is used for the bulk of that. So a script for a page is included in the header or in the body of the page. Scripts that are in the head are usually sitting there parked, waiting to be called. So they're triggered by clicking a button or doing something. So they're like functions that are sitting there. Whereas stuff that's in the body is executed when the page loads. Now we're going to look at a few things with code in the body, but over time, less and less of our code will be in the body, and it'll all be just in the header or in files somewhere waiting to be called. In JavaScript, you can declare your variables. If you don't declare them, you're probably fine anyway, but you should, just to keep things straight in your head. JavaScript is not very fussy when it comes to types. The types aren't very strong. So, like, it's possible, for example, to program in such a way that if you have a number, in a variable x, you can treat that like a string and then treat it like a number again, which is very sloppy programming, and JavaScript will let you away with that until then the one time out of 100 where it'll cause the whole thing to collapse, and then you're wondering what went wrong. So you need to be strict with yourself, because JavaScript might not be strict with you. And the variable names are fairly standard. You can start with a letter, and then you can have letters or numbers, but you can't start with a number, because it might be confused for an actual number. Okay? There's some reserved words, like time and things. I used this VB kind of naming convention here, just as, I had used VB for a while. In VB, some people, Visual Basic programmers, liked to prefix the variable names with a 3-letter code just to remind themselves what the type was, but it didn't actually do anything, just a kind of a hint. The variable names in JavaScript are case sensitive. So my count with a big C and my count with a small c are not the same variable name. So you should be very careful with yourself. Whatever variable naming convention you're used to, doesn't matter which one you use, but you should be consistent all the time. So what I do is I go for all lowercase, and then my life is simpler. But you can't chop and change. So whatever you're used to is fine. So what this program does here, and I'm probably going to get you to type this. Generally I won't get you typing, do you know what I mean? But today I'm probably going to get you to type this in, because I want you to get used to whatever text editor we're going to use, probably Notepad++, and just maybe some of the debugging tools and things. But in general, if I give you an example, I'll just give you the code then as well, ideally before the lab, but probably during. Okay? Anyway, so let's have a look at this program here, and we can see some of the main features of a JavaScript program. It's important to remember that you're still making a web page. So it's still a card-carrying, bog-standard web page with all of the features of a web page. So we have our HTML, head, title, slash head, body. No. This script here is going in the body. So it means it's going to be executed when the page loads, and the program is just going to go line by line and do what it's asked to do. So the first thing we're doing there is we're saying var d equals new date. Now this date method here with an uppercase D, that gets the date and time from the system. A big source of confusion is whether or not it's getting the time from the system or the time from the web. We spend the bulk of the college year in Greenwich Mean Time, which is also universal time. So internet time and Cork time happen to be the same thing for almost all of the college year. Whereas if you were taking this module in California, you'd be very concerned about the 8-hour time difference between internet time, universal time, and Pacific time, because there's an 8-hour time difference. But we happen to live in the time zone that has the prime meridian in it, so we kind of dodge this bullet because it's usually the same. But it can cause confusion then, because you're never quite sure what time you're looking at. Okay? Now, if we look then, we have here var int hr, which is hours, equals d dot get hours. Now this dot get hours method is extracting the hour part out of the time. So if it's the 19th of September at 9:30, and you apply the get hours to that piece of to that time data, it'll extract out 9, and you'll be left with 9 in that value. So it's a way to get the hours part of the time. Now it doesn't round up or down. If it was 9:55, it would still give you 9. Okay? So it means now that hour will be holding a value between 0 and 23. It doesn't get 24-hour clock, doesn't ever quite get to 24. It starts at 0. Okay? So we have a document.write. Now what document.write does is it outputs something to the page. And like I said, it's important to remember that you're building up a HTML page. So this output from the JavaScript is going to be treated as if it was, code on the page. So we do document.write D. That's just for the crack so we can actually see what the date and time object looks like. And then we're saying document.write br/. So we're actually outputting a tag in the JavaScript. And that's going to go onto a new line. That's what the br/ does. So let's now have a look at the code, okay? So, sorry. No. So this here is the if statement then in JavaScript. Unfortunately, JavaScript doesn't have an end if. So sometimes if you have a lot of nested ifs, you can get yourself in a bit of a knot. So you need to be careful. So you have a Boolean condition, and you must put it in brackets. So here we're saying if hours is less than or equal to 11, and it has to be in brackets like that. And then you can see there we have open bracket, we have what we're going to do if that condition is true, and then you have a closed bracket. So it's saying document.write good morning, and you can see there that it's outputting good morning, but it's also wrapping it in a bold tag. The output of the document.write must be correctly formatted HTML. You're basically building up HTML on the fly. So you're building up the page, and it's going to look different depending on different conditions, but you're still building a HTML page. You're assembling a HTML file there for the browser to display. Now this ampersand here, that's your Boolean AND in JavaScript. It's not AND, it's ampersand. // is R and exclamation mark is not. I put that in there to show you the AND. What's wrong with this though? Can you see what's wrong with that? Well, not wrong. What's a bit fishy about it? Yeah. The problem there is, well, the first part there we're saying if it's less than or equal to 11, then you want to say good morning. So if it's less than or equal to 11, the program will go into that section there, document.write good morning. If it's not less than or equal to 11, it'll go into the else part of the statement. Now here we're checking to see if it's greater than 11. But if it wasn't greater than 11, we wouldn't be here. If we're in this part of the program, ours has to be greater than 11. Because if it was less than or equal to 11, we'd be in the other part. So that's a bit redundant there. So there's no need for that test to see if ours is greater than 11. It has to be greater than 11 or you wouldn't be in this part of the code. But I wanted to show you the ampersand. Okay? So if it's greater than 11, basically if it's less than or equal to 16, we'll say good afternoon, and then otherwise we'll say good evening. And so depending on the time of day, this program will display different things. So you can see how you could do interesting things with that. You could see how, you know, if you had a website, you know, bishopstown.com or something, you could in the morning start with a lovely morning picture of Bishopstown, and in the evening have a lovely Bishopstown by night. You know? So what I want you to do is actually I want you to go to the trouble now of typing this in Notepad++ and giving it a lash in the browser just to get some practice, okay, with debugging. I can show you then as we go around, I can show you some of the debugging tools. Different browsers have different debugging tools that you can use. I really like Firefox's console because it gives you fairly detailed error messages fairly quickly. And you'll find when you're doing stuff in JavaScript, it can be frustratingly fussy. There's a hair out of place, you know, just won't do anything. So that can be troublesome as well. So we work on this one for this hour, and then the next hour we'll give you another example, take it up a notch, and that'll be a good day's work if we manage to get all that done.